Hi, I'm Patrick, and I'm just recording my QuickTime presentation of the whole of my F&P project, which shall be put on my Wix site after this is completed. First of all, I'm just gonna quickly go over my feedback from my teacher John. As you can see here, for the context section for the project proposal and schedule, I got a merit. I showed a good understanding and knowledge of subject context, used to make sound judgments, articulate ambitions, and clarify purpose, and so on and so forth. For my research, which was my primary, second, and production research, which included production research, visual research, my pitch, and so on and so forth, and context, I got a pass. I got the feedback satisfactory development of my F&P production that includes primary and secondary research, and I have demonstrated sufficient relevant information, and I've documented and used this information in the development of my ideas. And then for practical skills, for my ongoing production research, my final production, final product, my final video, and I think my rough edit, I also got a pass, and I showed adequate range of processes, skills, and knowledge were demonstrated. I showed competent execution and application of techniques which were used to develop ideas in a competent manner in my production paperwork, and my editing style was used reasonably effectively, and I directed the crew and my actors, well, one of my actors, because I was my other actor, competently, and so on and so forth. And for my evaluation and reflection, I have finished this, so hopefully this should change to a pass, and I should be overall on a pass. But I didn't, or before this week, I had to include a final evaluation that covers audience feedback and my own personal reflection about the F&P project, including technical, aesthetic, time management skills and processes I have undertaken and learned from, which I have indeed done. And also there are a few other evaluations, like my post and pre-production, which I hadn't included, which I think should have been here, but I also completed them as well. But I will show you that in a moment. First of all, I'm going to start from the initial proposal, because that's where the entire course stemmed from. So I'm going to go from chronological order of where the first piece of work to the last piece of work. So for my pitch, for my proposal, sorry, I chose the project title Seeing the Light due to the twist in my video that the interviewer realizes that the person that sat before him isn't actually interested in an interview and is only coming for his money, and the person who he is meant to be interviewing is a window cleaner by day, thus the pun, play on words, seeing the light. This is my rationale, which was basically just stating what skills I learnt on the course last year, and how this would help me going forth with this project, and just talking mainly about the reflective journal and how I had some experience with it last year, but not as much experience as I had this year, because last year we only had to use our reflective journal for our final F&P, whereas this year we had to use it all year round for all our different projects. So I was just basically going into detail about that. And then moving on to section 2, which is my project concept, I was talking about just a synopsis of my idea. That's a satirical based sketch about an older gentleman who thinks he's about to conduct an interview with a younger man who is dressed so casually you would have thought he was going to be meeting with his friends, and so on and so forth, just basically giving you a little taste of what's to come about my project, and I then moved on to ways in which I will make this concept, this idea, reality through collecting primary research through Survey Monkeys, or in my case, I actually used Google Drive. I mean Google um, Docs. I use the Google Docs survey. So let me just quickly change that to find out from my college peers, to find out what types of humour they have, and like what they enjoy, what they like to see, what type of genre they like whether it be entertainment, drama, comedy, whatever, what have you, and also what type of learners they are, like if they visually learn, if they like visual stuff, narrative based stuff, or performance based stuff. So I could try and implement that into my project and kind of tend to their needs in a way. I was also talking about how I would collect my secondary research by using online websites such as Wikipedia, and also I'm just going to quickly add the broadcasters audience research board. Yeah. So I was just I used Barb for my research, and I also did use Wikipedia, but I didn't actually put that into my project. But initially, I looked at Wikipedia first to do with like slapstick comedy and stuff like that. But mainly, I used Barb, the Broadcasters Audience Research Board, for stats and statistics about different viewing figures for different genres, so I could pick the most popular genre so I could have the best chance of getting exposure for my project. I also used BBC Three, their website, because as secondary research, because they appeal to quite a young audience too, so I looked further into that category when looking for secondary surveying, looked at some of their stats and statistics and what have you. I was also talking about in this section about booking equipment and shooting locations and stuff like that, and talking about how I'm just preparing myself to shoot, and that I will be constantly asking my teachers for their feedback, trying to get on top of stuff, getting their recommendations and also constructive criticism to help better my work if it needs any improvement. I'm also just talking about now my inspiration behind the course, which was The Office, and Spud's interview in the film Trainspotting. The inspiration that derived from The Office, the UK and the US versions, was Ricky Gervais's character, David Brent, and Steve Carell's character on the show, Michael Scott, because they were very exuberant, very funny, ludicrously funny, like crazy characters, but they could also retain themselves and conduct themselves in a formally manner, which I found very funny and interesting. So I wanted to kind of implement a character like that into my production. And also The Office, it's basically just about people in an office conversing, doing their work or whatever, dressed formally, which is where the clothing and the setting area inspiration came from. One of the scenes that particularly inspired my project in Trainspotting was when Spud takes a bump of coke off of Ewan McGregor's character in the beginning to ease up and relax for his interview, because he was very anxious and nervous about it, and then it just completely made him crazy and just made him constantly move back and forth in a chair that you see him in, because it cuts from scene to scene to scene, from where he's just can't stop moving and stuff. And yeah, I thought that was hilarious, and I tried to implement. That's why I used that as a source of inspiration. My running time would be approximately 5 minutes, and this is correct because it was about 4 minutes, so approximately 5 minutes falling on a category. My target audience is 16 to 34-year-old men, which I found off the BBC website, and what type of content they use, like Family Guy and stuff, which is appeals to both younger people that are probably interested in animation and slightly older people, through the sexual undertones, violence, adult humour, stuff like that. So I thought that I could appeal to a broader range of people, and I thought that, not trying to be sexist, that girls wouldn't really find my project that appealing, and I thought I'd have a better chance of appealing to the male side of things, so that's why I just did 16 to 34-year-old men. Yeah. And then I basically just carry on about how my project is not only for teenage people but also for adults too, and it's quite diverse in that way. I then go on about talking about Vox Pop, which I use for my audience feedback with some people in my college course, Joel, Taylor, Liam and Adam, and got their post-production feedback, and also off my surveys, which was another source of post-productive research as well. So yeah, and then finally we have my evaluation, which is basically just talking about how I'm going to evaluate and reflect upon my work after it's completed, which is what my reflective journal was for and what I used it for, to document my personal analysis and progression, and then any changes throughout all the stages of my project. Like if I change my idea slightly or change actors or what have you, or stuff like that, something on those lines, I can document it there. And then I just talk about how I was going to hand out the first draft of my script to my friends and stuff, because my script, in my case, because I was doing minimal editing and not really much special effects or anything like that in my project. It was just like simple cut or like back and forth conversation, so I needed my script to be very funny and flow well and be really good. So I had to that was probably one of the most important things in my production, were my script and my script, because literally that's the be all and end all of my project. Be all and end all. I'm just talking about target audiences and demographics and psychographics, and how I'm going to get their opinions on comedy through my pre-production and post-production survey and stuff like that, and that I will get research from other YouTube channels, see what type of comments they have, like comedy sketches on YouTube, see what comments they have and whatnot, and that's it really for the proposal. And then I just state my research sources and stuff like that, and give them credit and acknowledge them, and yeah, so that's my proposal. And then as for my pitch, if it ever loads. Eventually. Still waiting. Yeah, for my pitch, this is just basically adding on from my proposal. This was the second biggest piece of work I had to do for my course at the beginning. Basically just had to state what the name of my production would be, Seeing the Light, what genre it fell under, so it's a drama-based comedy sketch, and the approximate running time of the video. I then had to talk about my schedule, and which helped me plan out and spread out the work that I was doing for my course, and keep me organised, and so I know which day I do what and stuff like that. I then talked about productions similar to mine. We had to talk about 3 productions that were similar to that of what we were doing, and I used the Switch with YouTube video by Cristiano Ronaldo, and he switches bodies literally with a young boy, because initially I wanted to do some kind of switch, like a reversal of roles, so like the interviewer starts being interviewed by the interviewee halfway through or something like that. So I just kept that as inspiration anyway, because there still was kind of a switch at the end, but not an actual switch, like a physical switch like I had first intended. I also obviously have The Office and Spud's interview in Trainspotting, and I have the scenes at the bottom where Spud, because he's on drugs, high on drugs, he constantly is moving back and forth in his chair, which I really enjoyed and made me want to do a scene or lots of scenes where my character was sitting down and try and get comedy out of that. And then I use The Office and the way they dress and like the way they just do plain editing and stuff like that, but still make it really funny with their like dry sense of humour, and I use that as production similar to mine. I then moved on to character profiles with pictures of myself and my teacher Nick, who was one of my actors, and just talking about that the interviewer was meant to be like a neat, presentable, formal guy, very dashing, just looking spiff and span, just nice and well organised, whereas my character, the window cleaner, was meant to be a bit scruffy, looking very casual, like you thought he was going out for his mates, like that you would have think he would be on his way to an interview dressed like that, and to be kind of funny and kind of like witty and banterous, have a little bit of banter and stuff like that. Yeah. And then for my primary and secondary target audience, I was just talking about how I used the BBC Three target audience, and how they focused their programs towards people between 16 and 34 years old. Yeah, how they target young people like that, but they also do target older people as well, but their vast consensus of people is that range of young verging on adults. And I was just talking about how I took inspiration from them and how their how their target audience is the type of target audience that I would be trying to go after, and yeah, how I have further primary and secondary research in my other slides, but yeah, this is just generally talking about that, and mainly just how I use them as inspiration. The primary and secondary audiences is just talking about viewing figures, courtesy of the Barb website, that show the monthly viewing figure by genre for February 2017, which is when I was conducting this research, and it shows that entertainment and drama, so comedic comedy, which is what I was going into my genre, was the most viewed, and so I would have the best chance of getting exposure or my project being seen if that's what most people are looking at. I then looked into ITV 1 and 2, which have a similar target audience to to BBC Three, because like BBC Three used to show Family Guy, ITV have got American Dad, which is made by the same maker of American Dad, and has many of the actors like Seth MacFarlane, the creator himself, voices in both, so it's like a very similar target audience and stuff like that. And yeah, and then I basically just went on to more secondary research, and share of audience again, and like how that benefits me and gets me the best chance of getting exposure. I then talked about secondary research summary, on how I looked at charts and statistics and like looked further in depth into Trainspotting and The Office and stuff like that, and also I used online forums of The Office US series reviews online and read some reviews, and that helped me. Here I just showcase a couple of my visual research sources, once again being like The Office and stuff like that, and I just say this is part of my visual research. This isn't all of it, this is just part of it. Visual research continued, just talk about that. I then talk about my equipment, so my DLSR camera which I used, yeah, my DLSR camera. Here I just talk about my equipment and so I use a Panasonic camcorder for a more retro feel, a tripod, office desk. I did not need a lighting kit in the end. I used natural lighting inside the building coming through the window. My costumes consisted of a smart suit, basically casual clothing. I use a shotgun mic / boom mic and an SD card. Here I just talk about my location recce and show pictures of the actual room that I used, the actual room that I did use, which was ESO7 in the Barnet campus, the Wood Street campus of my college, which it just says there. I was given the permission to film here by my teachers, and they said that I wouldn't need a to do a location release form, so I just didn't, just to make that aware. Yeah, the window from which the video was like recorded from was really bright on the days that I recorded, over the 3 days that I recorded, so I was lucky in that sense because I didn't need any extra lighting, and the room was big enough and it just looked nice and formal, and yeah, it was really good. Here I just talk about theoretical and actual problems that could occur, like loud surroundings disrupting audio, people not turning up, etc. Stuff like that, just common occurrences that could happen, and some stuff like that. Pre-production research, I just talk about things that I want to do, like pre-production research that I'm going to carry out that I was doing at the time, because I was contacting areas, finding actors until I found my actors and stuff like that, looking around in my area for suitable workspaces and such. Here I just talk about my crew and cast in my project, me, myself and my sound recorder, Lara Sweeney. Yeah. Here I just talk about how I'll get audience feedback through surveys, primary through my post-production survey, Voxpop / focus group with members of my college, and through online forums like Reddit and stuff like that. Here I talk about the technical side of things. What you call it? I just talk about the technical side of things, and my camera style, what type of graphics I'm going for, what type of audio I'm using, my editing style, just to cutcom, back and forth cutcom, and then here I just talk about some of my survey responses from the time. I since have got a lot more survey responses than that, but at the time I was just showing a few, seeing as this was my initial pitch, and I got way more responses as the year went on. But yeah, that's what I got for that moment in time. Next I'm going to show my schedule, just briefly, very quickly. Just going to try and skim through this. For my schedule here, I just talk about different dates, what I'm going to be doing, visual research, reflective journal, stuff like that. When I start unit 3, kind of used it as a reflective journal in a way, because I just like stated what I'd done as well as what I was going to do, so it's kind of a past and present reflective journal in a way. And then here I just talk about days I'll be shooting, stuff like that, completing deadlines, making sure all work is up to scratch, etc. And then down here is just where I talk about the later stages of the course, and I explain how I'm not going to be enrolling for year 2 as I'm going on to an apprenticeship after this year, and stuff like that, and I'll be completing work for my referral, and then I'm just not doing anything here because I won't be in college after this point. So yeah. Next I'm going to talk about my problem solving log. I think we should go on to. For my problem solving log, this is where you stated problems, both theoretical and actual problems that could occur on the course, and like what you could run into. For example, like at the beginning, I put SD cards from previous users being stuck in the camera that I've rented for my project. So that's the problem, and then you do a resolution. And I said I will return the SD card to Juan and Jeff, who run the media pod, which is where everyone books out their equipment from in the media course. And then they'll put the SD card into their computers, or their computer, find out who it is, and hopefully give it back to the rifle owner. Another thing that could happen theoretically is the camera battery could run out whilst filming. And I just said make sure that my camera is fully charged, and maybe carry out a spare battery when I take it out, ask for a spare battery and stuff like that. And then I just generally here talk about any little problem, big or large, that could happen on the course, and how I can resolve it, how I can fix it, like filming outside on all the noise, all of that stuff. And that's really it when it comes to the problem solving log. Important, but not as important as other things in the work. I'm just going to quickly now go on to my audience research, just briefly. Okay, so my audience research, the first thing I talked about was my demographic / target audience and analytics. I talked about my audience research, here 16 to 34-year-olds. I used the YouTube graph, BBC 1, 2, 3 and 4, and a total UK video consumption chart to demonstrate some of my audience here, and like how my content was more for YouTube or Vimeo instead of television content, because that's what most people are on nowadays. I then go on to continuation of demographics analysis and research of what 16 to 34-year-olds watch online. So I was talking about Family Guy and American Dad and stuff like that, and how they appeal to their audiences and such, well, within the UK at least, and how they grow their audiences and such. I then went on to my ITV/ITV2 target audience research, and how they have a very similar content base and audience base compared to BBC Three, and how they coincide with each other and are perfect for me to do research on, basically. I then go into the research about YouTube analytics and demographics. So I showed for my secondary research that there is a big age division on YouTube. Like, it's not just as you can see, 18 to 24-year-olds. It's not just younger people that like it. Like 25 to 34-year-olds also enjoy watching it, and older ages past that, right up to the age of 65. So that's why I try to expand my target audience to not only 18 to 24-year-olds or younger people, but from to 34 to slightly older people too, that are able to grasp what YouTube is, but like not to be old to be distant from it and stuff. And then I just basically talk about YouTube viewership and women and men divide on YouTube and stuff like that. And then for my final slide, I talk about E4 viewership and how they capture their young audience and stuff, and how they relate to my project. And I remember growing up, I watched a lot of E4 programs such as The In-Betweeners, Skins and Misfits, which also appeals to younger people and older people through their sexual and funny content and stuff like that, and like they're like just the things that happens in Skins, like drugs, sex, money issues, stuff like that. In Between is just tomfoolery, just like sixth form boys just messing about. Misfits, people that are on probation doing community service. Like, it's all themes like that that just attracts people that are slightly younger but also older as well. They can enjoy it too. And then I just talk about basically going to that and my experience with those programs, and how they were good research for me in my project, and how they helped further my idea basically, and like really helped firm or tone in my target audience. Here I'm going to just quickly show my visual research, and I don't know why, but the visual research is messed up. Like for some parts it's fine, like at the beginning here, but then it becomes all weird and spaced out, and I don't know how. But for example here, comedy sketch. I knew I wanted to do office surroundings. Yeah, like this. So that's the area that I wanted to do. Ideally. Here's just a research from Train Spotting, and I know it looks messed up. I apologise for that. But yeah, this is, you get the gist. This is Train Spotting visual research, and then The Office. So there's, like I said, there's bits that are not messed up, and messed up I don't know. See formal wear, mid shots, just quite slick appearances, and then some scruffy stuff like that. Really, for my visual research, and yeah, that's basically what I did for my visual research. Now, moving on to my surveys, or not my surveys, I'm going to do my pre-production survey and then my post-production survey a bit later. But here's my pre-production survey. Just basically, here's the questions that I used, and then here's the responses that I got. I found out that majority of people thought that the idea of a drama-based comedy sketch was good, that most people liked comedy sketches, most people preferred visual-based storylines, although there were a strong amount of people that liked narrative. People enjoyed the premise of my idea. People gave their opinions on entertainment dramas. People said whether or how many comedy-based programs or films they watched, or if they watched them at all. I asked, do you think my idea could work? Majority of people thought it could indeed work. I asked people how television is accessed, like rather online or just physically watching in front of a TV, and most people thought that's done online these days, which I agree with. Majority of people thought I should agree with me by putting my FMP up on YouTube, which is like the most viewed video program site in the world, basically. And then 60% of people said that they would, or more than half said that they will watch my project once completed it. They may have been in a rush and just put that, I don't know. So that's that. And then moving on from this, I'm going to now go into my production paperwork and start off with my script. For my script, I was really set on making this as funny as possible, and yeah, here's my script. It has the shot list as well incorporated into it. That's why you see mid shot and stage directions and stuff. And yeah, so I was just really focused on, in my script, trying to get as funny a script as possible, trying to go for subtle dry humor, not just obvious stick in your face humor, more like you had to think about it, wasn't all obvious. Yeah, and just I really needed to perfect my script, and I think overall it did come out quite well, judging by the feedback. Lots of people said it was funny, which was really good to hear, really relieving for me to hear, and yeah, just really good in general. I think that my teacher, who was one of my actors, even said that it was quite a good script, so I was quite happy when he told me that this is the case. And then I've just got my production cast logo just there in the corner as always. Next I'm going to move on to my storyboard, and I chose to do I did a physical drawn out storyboard, but for the purpose of time, because I think I lost that stupidly, I had to just quickly upload a I had to upload a animated like computerized storyboard where I just took screenshots from my project and put it here. My teacher said that was fine. So yeah, this is just the beginning stages, so like wide shots, close up shot, POV, mid shots, wide mid shot. Just going through the different. It doesn't show every single clip of my FMP, but it just shows like the different stages, and like it goes from like the beginning, middle to the end. And yeah, I think that the storyboard came out as I'd liked it to. It gets to the point, it shows all different parts of my video, and I'm really glad of how it came out overall. Now we're going to move on to my test shots briefly. These are my test shots that I recorded, just shots, because I took 3 takes of every shot. I had a couple test shots for each shot that I'd shot, and these are just a few of them, just a couple pictures here, just showing my test shots. Yeah, here I've just got my actors agreement here, from my teacher. That was also my actor. Here I've got my risk assessment, which helped me highlight all the dangers, all the risks, and how to avoid them in my course. Here we have my location recce, which just stated the room that I was filming in, gave credit, explained how my teacher said I didn't need to do a location release form because I was filming at a public place in my college, and I got some consent from my teachers and the head of my department and stuff. Just describing that the light of the room was good, stuff like that. So I didn't need excess lighting equipment, had all the audio equipment I needed, SD card, camera, stuff like that. Just talked about the surroundings and stuff. Then I have my production research, which is just talking about my location recce again, just briefly, equipment list, so like the shotgun mic, Rode shotgun mic, boom mic, tripod, camera, and SD card, literally very simple. The crew and cast, myself, Nick and Laura, and audio research, just brief audio research, and I did my audio research from the type of audio that they use in the office, which was just I think they use boom mics, and they use boom mics in the office and eggshell mics, but they still tried to make it feel like didn't use clip-on mics or anything like that to make it feel more homely and like it was an actual office setting and not set up, as it would be quite obvious or blatant that it would be set up if it was with clip-on mics. Here is my call sheet. Yeah, just basic, just saying context, schedule of shooting, and production, like post-production, stating all the equipment we used, movement order where we recorded, how to get there, how to travel there, and such and so on, and stuff like that. Just boring stuff really. My budget I'm going to quickly go to as well. Just quickly ran through the equipment I was using, or some of the equipment I could have possibly used, how much they would cost to hire, just doing in research basically, not just into the equipment I could use or I did use, but just generally, just to know about camera equipment in general and what I could use, and what I decided to use and stuff like that. So yeah, and then we have my actual budget form here, which is just me talking about the budget that went into the project, stuff like that, the ingoings, outgoings, stuff like that, just boring stuff like that really. Now I move on to my evaluations, I suppose, starting first of all with my my research evaluation, sorry. For my research and context evaluation, I was mainly just talking about the visual research, primary and secondary research, and also audience research mainly, because the research and context is just talking about the context of a video, how like, and what basically the inspiration was behind it, both audience research and visual research, primary, secondary, stuff like that. And yeah, just talking about my production research really, how the idea came to be, how it came to fruition, stuff like that, like what the idea was and how it got stemmed from visual research and stuff like that. We now move on to my production slash pre-production evaluation, which was mainly just talking about test shots, the production or the pre-production paperwork, mainly just talking about the pre-production paperwork, and how that helped me and bettered me and helped me obviously create my project, because without that this couldn't have been a thing. I then talked about the script. I just focused mainly on the most important parts, which I thought was the most important parts of the production research. So here I just talk about my research, stuff like that, take screenshots to show what I'm talking about, stuff like that. I then went on to talk about my survey audience research, just showed a couple of screenshots of my survey, talked about my target audience and what my survey statistics showed me, what I learned from this, and so on and so forth. And yeah, that was really what I did for my production and pre-production evaluation. Moving on to my post-production evaluation, this is where I talked mainly about my rough edit and my final edit mainly. This is where I talked about my post-production rough and final edit. I think you were supposed to talk about feedback in this section, but I decided to leave that for my final evaluation. So mainly I was just talking about my rough slash final edit here, how they differed from one another. I talked about my things that went wrong and things that went well with the recording. I also talked about my editing style. I talked about my rough edit and things that I didn't include, and stuff like that, and things that I fixed in the final edit opposed to the rough edit, like when I added in my logo, shots, etc. Just talk about the footage, talked about how I got rid of certain things in my out of my rough edit, like for example the red dot, the infamous red dot that haunts me to this day. Got rid of it using After Effects and stuff, which I talked more about in my reflective journal, I must say, and in my final edit, my final evaluation. And then just moving on to my final evaluation, this is where we talk about basically an overview of everything in the course, like strengths, weaknesses, what went well, what didn't go so well. Yeah, strengths and weaknesses, like I said. Strengths and weaknesses, like I said, which I went on for quite a bit. If there was anything I would change, what would it be and why? Then we had to go into feedback that we got for a project, post-production feedback, which I used surveys and my focus group, to portray that from Adam, Joel and Taylor, like I said. Adam, Joel, Liam and Taylor, sorry. Like I said, just going into that, and that's really what I did for my final evaluation, just talking about what they thought about it, and Joel was just smiling there, just about what they thought, what they think went well, like they think that it was funny, and that I portrayed my character that I was trying to portray well, and so did Nick, but the audio looping in the background and a staticky and buzzing noise ruined it kind of, which it did, unfortunately. And finally, I'm going to be talking about my reflective journals. I have 2 reflective journals for my project. I have both a pre FMP evaluation, which is like from my 30-second narrative all the way up to my music video, and then I have a separate FMP reflective journal, if that makes sense. And Yeah, so my reflective journal leading up to the course changed a lot, because at the beginning of my reflective journal, I wasn't putting like, oh, what my strengths and weaknesses were, and like what could have been improved, what went well and stuff. I just literally described what the day was, instead of like describing different components. Like I was just describing what happened and not anything else, which changed throughout the progression of the course. I'd like to think, as I became better at writing my ideas down, my thoughts and feelings, being articulate with that. Because at first I was quite weirded out and quite strange. Like I can literally write down anything I want, like about my emotions and that. But gradually, as the course went on, I became better at that, talking about stuff like that and my strengths and weaknesses, because I didn't want to really talk about that first, because I was quite nervous about how I'd be perceived. But yeah, I managed to get that done in the end. And then here I'm just quickly showing from months ago my reflective journal, 30-second narrative evaluation and stuff like that. And then I'm just move on to synopsis for that, what I thought was inspiring, stuff like that, so on and so forth. And I just talk about my evaluation for my music video, stuff like that, and so on and so forth. Evaluation, and then 22 pages of that. And then this is my reflective journal for my FMP, which is just started on the 21st of February. Got my company logo there as well, as always. And then I just talk about, you can see how it's progressed, because immediately you can see I've got what happened, how did this help me. I posted at the beginning when it was literally just me talking about what I did, which isn't really the point of a reflective journal. 25 pages long. I then just talked about what had happened, stuff like that. I also noted that there was a gap between March the 10th to April the 11th, because I became very like demoralized with the course. I don't know why, and just very I'll be completely honest, uninterested with the course. Like I didn't see much point in doing it, like because I'm only looking for a pass. I was just thought, what's the point of doing it? But I did eventually do it and come round to doing it eventually, and described my recording and what went well and what went badly, and how I was trying to portray my character as, that I was nervous about doing it at first, how I overcame that, what my teacher said to me gave me encouragement. I also said about things like, at the beginning I was only recording like one type of shot, mid shots, and then I later went on to get different types of shots, stuff like that. I was more confident in my speaking as well, compared to my beginning shots to my end shots in my final edit, compared to my rough edit and my final edit. I also talk about recording setbacks. I wasn't able to record on a day that I wanted to record because I was in an exam in that room, but it was no bother, I got it done in the end, re-recording. And then I keep talking about today is hopefully going to be my final day of recording, even though there's one more day after this, because I forgot some more stuff out, or I had to redo stuff. Yeah, I then just basically talk about more of my strengths and weaknesses, about the buzzing and staticky noise that almost ruined the video, that I was able to resolve in the end in the equalizer in Final Cut Pro. I just then, on the 17th and the 18th, talked about that. I then talked about forgetting to record clips yet again, my red dot that I was really upset about and thought would ruin my video, but in the end was able to resolve in Final Cut Pro. I then talk about my rough edit, and that I purposely left out things that, because I had old shots and new shots at this point, and I purposely put in the old shots to put the new shots into my final edit to see how far I've come, how far I've progressed and such. And yeah, that's why I left out a lot of things that aren't in the rough edit in my final edit, just to show how much I've progressed. And I didn't think there was much point putting it in there when it could just be using my final edit, because they were good clips. I then talked about my editing style between the rough and final edit. Although there was a lot of different things, it still remained the same. It was just a classic cut back and forth conversation, just very easy, just lined up the clips in the timeline, because I had 3 of each clip in like one little footage part, and I would just cut the 3 parts up and then discard the 2 I didn't want, and then use that and stuff, use the one I wanted to, stuff like that. And then I finally say that I finished recording, and I did. I talk about my animated logo and stuff, and seeing the light, and I talk about and I show things like in my rough edit that I changed in my final edit, and stuff like that. I also talk about further about shots that I included in my final edit and stuff like that. And then I talk about the resolvement of the red dot issue, but before this I talk about shots that I enjoyed, and stuff like that, like the only, like when I say I've only come for my money, and the young man takes the money out of the interviewer's hand, and when Nick looks completely blankly at the picture that I gave to him, I thought that was very funny, so I included those as examples of shots that I thought was good. I then described after this how I got the red dot out of the rough edit, like here in my final edit, thanks to my help of my teacher Sonia, and how this was really good and made me feel really confident, and basically saved the ending of my shot, because besides from the red dot being in a shot, it was a really good, like the way it was shot, the movement of the camera, the lighting was perfect, so I was glad I got to get that fixed. I just talked about seeing the light, the final shot. Then I did a evaluation for my reflective journal overall for my FMP. Just briefly looked back at paperwork, production paperwork, proposal pitch and schedule, what went well, what went bad, some of my visual research, not all of it yet again, how it inspired in different ways, stuff like that, audience research, secondary research, YouTube demographics, charts from the bar broadcasters, audience, site and stuff like that, primary research through my surveys, how they helped me out, problem solving log and how that helped me out, and what I think went well, what went bad, strengths, weaknesses, etc. And then in the end I did a ending SWOT analysis of my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities that came with the course, and threats. I just said that my strengths were being able to overcome my fear of recording, being in front of a camera, which I did not know I had prior to this course, that I bettered my skills on Adobe After Effects and stuff like that, became better at editing and stuff, was able to take on more workloads and do better, more work quicker and stuff like that, and that I was able to just completely cool myself down and not over freak out about my workload and stuff like that, and what went wrong on the course. I said weaknesses were not being able to managing to complete my work on time, to achieve a grade higher than a pass, not being able to record my footage to one like I thought I would be able to, and legit, and not pushing myself further enough to get a better grade than I now think in hindsight I could have possibly achieved. I also could have put for my weaknesses about all the editing and stuff like that, but because I was able to rectify most of my editing issues, I decided not to put that in, simply for that reason. So I just left it out. Opportunities. This project did essentially act as a way for me to promote my brand, PF Productions, and get myself out there and to develop skills in the media industry that I can carry with me way past this course in future. Threats that came with the FMP mainly revolved around competition, people being better than me, trying to one-up me, stuff like that. Also there's a big competition with YouTube, lots of comedy sketches out there on the platform that people could enjoy better than mine, have components of the video that's better than mine, or they just personally prefer. It's all down to do with personal preferences at the end of the day with people's content and what they enjoy. It's just luck of the draw, really. And then I just did a little paragraph overall about how the reflective journal, however frustrating it may have seemed to me at first when we actually did it, because it seemed like a lot of work, was actually, looking back on it, a good feature over the course, because it helped me with my work and retracing my steps when doing some of my coursework, and also it was a good way for me to alleviate or relieve my stress. Like if I want to talk about my teachers doing something wrong in my opinion, or other people were like just things I didn't think did well or frustrating me on the course, I could. So it was really good in that sense, and I think the reflective journal was really good because of those things, that it gave me a way to reflect, to look at different things in a different way, and to just vent myself and like really express myself and stuff. So I think that was really good overall. Yeah, and I think that that is it. I shall be putting this QuickTime on my Wix website, which is shown here, patrickfred99.wix.com. And so yeah, thank you for listening, and goodbye.